Thanks to Albuquerque in the Southwest, which I love so much, thanks to the Tiwa people who've watched over this land, and thanks to everything that's brought us all to this point right here, right now. In our modern world, so many people are trapped in thinking there's nothing beyond the ordinary. Nothing beyond our minds and bodies, nothing beyond our usual ways of approaching things, and nothing beyond the physical world itself. Of course, some of us know the power of going beyond the ordinary to a more soulful, spiritual, or numinous perspective, and connecting with a radically deeper way of being that's much more creative, insightful, resilient, and unshakably strong. However, there's a huge gulf between the ordinary and soulful perspectives that's very difficult to bridge. Not only are numinous experiences tough to find words for in general, there are hardly any chances to talk about them in daily life without coming across as weird, preachy, or out of touch with everyday reality, and that's why I use art to point beyond the ordinary. After all, art can reach people from all worldviews, backgrounds, and levels of development, and art is one of the most powerful tools we have for connecting with the sacred and sparking a real transformation of consciousness. Today I'll be sharing my latest series of tree photographs called Beyond, which has been bursting out of me in the last year and is the cornerstone of my current activism. I'd like to start by taking us to a time when I'm out in the world, standing in front of a tree making one of these photographs. If someone walks past, they usually look up at the tree and then seem a little confused, figuring there must be a bird or something up in the tree that they can't see. So they ask what I'm photographing, and I have to figure out which answer I'll give. The quick answer is that I'm photographing the tree itself, and I can point to the beauty that drew me to the tree in the first place. However, that feels unsatisfying because it only begins to scratch the surface of what I'm really doing. The longer answer is that I'm doing a kind of meditation, both visually and with my whole being. By moving the camera as I take the photographs, I let the physical world dissolve so we no longer see the tree itself or individual branches or leaves. Instead, the tree, the sky, and myself, and perhaps future viewers of the photograph, all merge together into a radiant river of light, just as any of us can dissolve into something much greater than ourselves during soulful or numinous experiences. I know that's a lot for most people to take in right away, so I appreciate whenever I can explain more, like in exhibitions or in talks like today. For context about this new series, and to help us go from the ordinary world to the beyond, I'd like to share a little about how I've photographed trees in the past. Over the last 21 years, each of my series corresponds to a different way of seeing the world and a different kind of activism. When I started photographing trees in 2003, I stayed pretty close to how we usually see trees out in the world. I focused on celebrating their physical beauty and encouraging us to actually notice the treasures of the world rather than just being stuck in our heads. The more deeply I looked at the trees, the more in love I fell with even their smallest details, and that's how I began to find my voice as an abstract artist. I gradually began looking for ways that my images could have even more of a meditative feeling, like in this image where I took a daytime photograph and inverted it in the darkroom so the tree crackles like a lightning bolt across the midnight sky, just as I feel split open by the process of making art. As much as I loved the photographs that I was making, I began to feel that no single photograph can convey the full complexity of our deepest experiences, like the most beautiful moments of our life, or the most difficult and painful ones, like when my father passed away in 2011. So in my series Memoria, I began using multiple exposures, taking several photographs from different angles and combining them together in the camera as a kind of meditative dance with the tree. I invented a technique to let me build up really dense patterns and textures, like memories layered on top of each other, or the mysterious world of imagination, the mundus imaginalis, as Henri Corbin called it. Working on my art was bringing me so much joy, I decided I needed to express this exuberance in color, and in all seasons, not just winter. My next series continued using multiple exposures, but the all-over style of composition made it feel like glorious Jackson Pollock paintings were hiding in ordinary trees everywhere. To me, these photographs feel like embracing many perspectives at once, such as the mundane, the profane, and the sacred, even though the sacred was still more of an abstract concept for me, rather than something I'd experienced for myself. In my next series of tree photographs, From Wandering to Illumination, which I showed at last year's conference in Asheville, I took mandala-like, multiple exposure photographs of trees and turned them into 3D images as meditations on the entire spiritual journey. Looking deeply at these images for months played a key role in my main awakening experience in 2014, which finally opened a direct connection with the sacred. From then on, my activism focused on soul and soulful experiences, and I spent the next 9 years figuring out how to talk about these experiences, why they matter, and comparing tools from the world's wisdom traditions. For anyone who'd like to see more photographs from any of these series, at the end of my talk, I'll include links to my website and other resources. In late 2023, I was trying to figure out where to go next with my art after dealing with challenges like agonizing back pain, surviving cancer, and my mother passing away traumatically. I needed a new kind of creative outlet and was planning to focus on something other than trees, but I kept thinking back to a photograph I took in the fall of 2019. I had gone for a walk while I was waiting for my other camera to be fixed and came across a stunning tree with bright red leaves. I didn't want to take a conventionally pretty photograph, so I decided to move the camera while taking the image to create what's sometimes called a motion blur. The red leaves, brown branches, and white clouds behind the tree all merged together into a radiant, exuberant flow of light, resulting in this photograph. This experience still had an impact on me years later, so I started taking motion blur photographs of every tree I came across, and I was surprised at how beautiful any tree looks with this technique, at least from the right perspective and at the right time. Just as all parts of life can look vastly different depending on our perspective, from one angle a tree might look dark and impenetrable, while from another angle it's bathed in dazzling sunlight. This technique is so sensitive that even the slightest movement will totally change the overall image. Even if I try to move the camera in a precise line, I often end up with unexpected shapes like the arabesque fireworks in this photograph. I don't try to control what emerges because the surprises are better than anything I could even try to think up. Most of the trees in this series are ones I come across in daily life, like in my yard or along busy roads, as well as in more wild areas. For example, when I photographed a small, ordinary tree next to my house, its dry brown leaves merged together with the white clouds, making it feel like an ancient cave painting was brought out into the sunlight, with its figures dancing so ecstatically across the vault of heaven that they become a blur. Compared with cave people, I'm honestly not sure if the average person today is any more able to connect with soul. So much beautiful wisdom has emerged over the millennia, but the key heart of it still feels mostly lost in translation, bearing only a hollow resemblance to the original insights. When people turn away from soul and inner work, a very precious baby gets thrown out with the bathwater. In this series, one way I point to soul is with the radiance that shines through a lot of the images. Sometimes this light might come from a leaf or a branch that was turned at just the right angle to catch the sun, or from something bright behind the tree like a cloud or the sky. Even the tiniest glimmer can light up the whole image, just as a single soulful experience can illuminate our entire life. Sometimes I keep the shutter open a little longer to let in as much light as possible, just as we all may need to slow down a bit in life to connect with soul. It's not a coincidence that almost every spiritual tradition points to this radiance somehow or another, like the glow shown around certain religious figures, and in practices like Tibetan Buddhists visualizing a transcendent clear light, or Reiki meditations on the great bright light. These aren't just symbols or metaphors, though. Many soulful experiences involve actually seeing light with our eyes closed, such as patterns of light or color, or an intense radiance that takes up our whole field of vision, which I started seeing soon after I decalcified my pineal gland in 2014. Most broadly, though, the radiance in the photographs reminds me of the whole range of soulful experiences and how deeply they can transform us. We've all had experiences that take us outside our usual sense of self because we've all been pierced by moments of awe, wonder, breathtaking beauty, and intense love. All of us have had deep insights, realizations, and aha moments, and perhaps a dark night of the soul or two. However, some soulful experiences take us farther beyond the ordinary. For example, one day I was working at my desk when suddenly I had a vision. It felt like someone opened a trap door over my head and something poured down on me like brilliant sunshine but intensely sacred. Another day, I was walking down the hallway and suddenly found myself looking down from a foot or two above my body, and similar out-of-body experiences kept happening occasionally for a month or two. One night, right after I laid down in bed, I suddenly felt like 4 invisible figures were lifting me up into the sky and through an exquisitely beautiful gate made of dazzling gems and pearls. Then there's my awakening experience when my energy shot up from the base of my spine to the crown of my head and kept going up through a tunnel made of information and love until all I could see was a blinding brilliance, and I came to know what oneness is. I wish I had time to go into more detail about more kinds of soulful experiences, but in general, many of them happen when we're unusually calm, or in big peak moments, or when we're pushed beyond our usual limits, like during childbirth. One of the least understood kinds of experience are visions, when thoughts or images come to us out of the blue that can feel radically different from our usual thoughts. For example, the visions that I'm showing now came while I was working on this paper and arrived fully formed like the ringing of a bell, often with a different style, such as using archaic words and avoiding the past tense or terms like you and me. They also usually have a deeply compressed amount of meaning, like every word is a jewel reflecting vast infinities and resist being pinned down in a linear string of words, feeling better suited to a more complex form like combining poetry and visual art. People who have had soulful experiences usually find them to be life-changing because we can find unimaginable treasures in the deepest parts of our being and in the highest heights. We might learn who we really are, why we're here, and how to be more fully awake, more fully alive, fully present, and fully whole. We can also become much more balanced, resilient, and effective in the world than we ever thought possible. And we might find a source of endless wisdom, creativity, strength, hope, love, and compassion. We might also start to understand what countless traditions have been pointing at for thousands of years, but keep being misunderstood like a translation of a translation of a translation. Soulful experiences can have a great many other kinds of impact on us, rather like a supercharged aha moment that shines a light into every single part of our being. As powerful as these experiences can be, we don't all necessarily have to have any big experiences of our own. Many people deepen their connection with soul gradually over the years without having any experiences beyond the ordinary. And of course, we can all lead immensely rich and meaningful lives even if we only focus on everyday concerns. However, why do we hardly ever talk about what we can learn from other people's spiritual encounters? After all, we don't have to directly see a supernova or pulsar to believe they exist. We can decide to trust scientists who've made careful observations and developed theories to explain what they've seen. Why can't we place a similar amount of trust in the many thousands of people from all over the world and throughout history who have been careful, sober, and detailed observers of their own inner experience? If we follow the data wherever it leads, not only will we better understand the full range of human experience and improve people's lives, we can also clarify that there's no reason for conflict between religions or between religion and science. All traditions have been pointing at the exact same thing, like blind people touching different parts of the same great elephant. All paths truly lead to the same place if we follow them far enough. I'm so glad the theme of this conference is activism, because the world desperately needs soulful approaches, and there are a lot of things we can do to reach more people. The most important thing is to start building a network of activists so we can support each other, amplify all our voices, build off each other's work, and discuss how to handle some key issues like what we're sharing, with whom, and how. In terms of what we're sharing, I've tried to show that the most crucial thing to share about soul isn't ideas. Experiences of soul are what really matters, because that's what can change lives the most. There are many different ways to connect with soul, but my process is to surround myself with sacred space from the inside out. I start by shaking off any tension, maybe just from my body and my mind, or maybe from every aspect of my existence so far. Then I bring my body into alignment, breathe a little deeper, and calm my mind to enter the gap between my thoughts. Then I drop into my center, concentrate my energy until it feels like a star bursting into life, and open up from there until I'm in a fully open, highly energized state and filled with radiance inside and out. There's a lot to say about every part of this process, so I'll post a video on YouTube going into more detail. A lot of factors affect how well we're able to connect with soul, which I discussed in my book, From Wandering to Illumination, and in a forthcoming book with my husband, Stephen Noriani, on Gateways to the Numinous. I also feel it's important for activism to be a two-way street, because everyone has a lot to learn from everybody else. Jungians have a lot to share with others, but tools from other approaches can strengthen the Jungian approach as well, like working deeply with meditation, the breath, energy centers, and including modalities like music or even the sense of smell. Dialogue with other approaches can also help clarify various ideas related to soul, such as understanding the full spectrum of being, rather than just the shadow, ego, soul, and capital S self, and a better understanding of the non-physical world. As for who we're trying to reach, absolutely everyone can benefit from deepening our connection with soul, not just people out there who aren't already involved in a soulful tradition. We also need to reach all of us, including you, me, and everyone else who's already trying to live consciously. For example, a lot of people think that soul and the capital S self are just symbols, metaphors, or abstract concepts, rather than things we can all directly connect with. I just hope that when more of us talk openly about soulful experiences, more people will realize what's really possible. It may help to remember that some kinds of people may be especially open to our message because vast crowds are searching for meaning, like those who are interested in self-help, mindfulness, transcendence, or life hacking. Also, there are countless groups that we can make common cause with, including the contemplative branches of all major religions like Kabbalah, Sufism, Gnosticism, and so forth, as well as approaches focused on the mind, body, energy, or a combination of them. There's also room for dialogue with scientific traditions like string theory and quantum mechanics, as well as with traditions like astrology, channeling, or even Pentecostalism, whether we agree with their approach or not. There are far more opportunities for dialogue and collaboration than we might usually think. Meanwhile, there are a lot of crucial things to discuss about how we share what we have to offer. For example, how can we find words for the wordless, or for the process of dropping into the center of our being, like can happen during analysis and meditation? Are there other words we can find for visions or inspiration that aren't either too loaded or too vague? Do we even have any words for an ongoing flood of visions that continues for years and years? Given how sacred a lot of these experiences feel, how can we talk about them with people who aren't spiritual while still honoring the numinous heart of the experiences? And since most people haven't heard of the mundus imaginalis, or the non-physical world, what do we call the place where we go in dreams, visions, and other soulful experiences? Maybe we should start talking about the multiverse, since that lines up with theories from physics as well as pop culture. Whenever possible, we need to speak the language of who we're trying to reach. A final question I'll raise here is, Since most people get excited about exploring outer space, how can we get them as excited about exploring inner space? There's a huge amount more to say about everything I've mentioned today, but we don't have to stick to a linear perspective. In the world of soul, everything reflects everything else, as with a hologram or Ender's mirror. So I've tried to make each part be a key to unlock the entirety. I'll post videos on YouTube going into more detail about these photographs, my experiential process, the full spectrum of being, and much more. So please tell me if you'd like me to let you know when they're ready. For most of my life, I approach things from the ordinary perspective, so I know how easy it is to think that's all that's possible, and how difficult it is to go beyond the ordinary if we don't have the right tools and know-how. The Jungian tradition has a lot of treasures that can be very helpful, but when combined with treasures from other traditions, the combination is even more powerful. At this challenging time we find ourselves in today, we're all being called to go beyond our ordinary perspective, beyond our limited sense of who we are, beyond all barriers, beyond all words and concepts, and beyond any voice that tells us we can't change the world. It's time for people to stop dismissing soulful experiences as ancient myths, imaginations gone wild, or the refuge of gullible and irrational people, rather than our birthright for any of us to experience, and the pinnacle of what's truly possible. The journey of soul isn't about going somewhere far away or becoming something radically different. The journey leads us to the very center of our being, and leads us to exactly where we are, right here, right now. Let's change the world together. Peace, love, and blessings.